Hello S1, this is Mrs Hamilton speaking and I'm going to be taking through your new unit which is called Flannan. Now this is a poem based on the mystery of Flannan, which is the disappearance of the Alien Moor lighthouse keepers. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to read the poem Flannan by Wilfred Wilson Gibson. We're going to discuss what the poem could mean, and later we're going to analyse the poem and complete a textual analysis assessment. First, some technical words though. So a stanza is a unit or section of poetry like a paragraph, or you might have heard the word verse before when we're referring to song. The rhyming scheme is to do with the pattern of rhyme, and we'll talk about that in more detail in another lesson. Word choice is linked to the particular words chosen because of their effect. Imagery, metaphors, similes and personification. Tone refers to the speaker's attitude, how they are feeling. Mood and atmosphere is to do with how you feel when reading the poem. So in this first lesson, we're just going to read through sections of the poem and discuss what might have happened and come up with a theory. Now, this PowerPoint is also in your OneNote and you should be able to type on it if you save it as a background. And basically, whenever we read a bit and you discuss with your teacher what you think has happened, I then want you to add your notes onto the boxes that say, add your notes in here. So we're going to start with the first part of the poem, and this gives a bit of a background to what the poem, where the poem is set and what might have happened. Here we go. Though three men dwell on Flannan Isle to keep the lamp alight, as we steered under the lee we caught no glimmer through the night. A passing ship at dawn had brought the news, and quickly we set sail to find out what strange thing might ail the keepers of the deep sea light. The winter day broke blue and bright with glancing sun and glancing spray, as o'er the swell our boat made way, as gallant as a gull in flight. So I want you to pause the video, discuss what the background is to this mystery, and then add your notes into the box underneath that slide. On you go. Moving on now to our first clue. So here's the next section of the poem. But as we neared the lonely isle and looked up at the naked height and saw the lighthouse towering white with blinded lantern that all night had never shot a spark of comfort through the dark, so ghostly in the cold sunlight it seemed that we were struck the while with wonder all too dread for words, and as into the tiny creek we stole beneath the hanging crag. Okay, so what clues do you get from that section? What things are strange? Add your notes into the section underneath your slide. Now it gets stranger. This is the next section of the poem. We saw three queer, black, ugly birds, too big by far in my belief for guillemot or shag, like seamen sitting bolt upright upon a half-tide reef, but as we neared they plunged from sight without a sound or spurt of white. So again, pause the video. What's strange about what the narrator has seen? Add your notes into the section here. Let's move on to the next section of the poem. This time I want you to think about how the speaker is feeling. So I'm going to read this section. Again, I want you to have a class discussion. How do you think the speaker is feeling? And then add your notes underneath. And still too mazed to speak we landed, and made fast the boat, and climbed the track in a single file, each wishing he was safe afloat on any sea, however far, so it be far from Flannan. And still we seemed to climb, and climb, as though we'd lost all count of time, and so must climb for evermore. Yet all too soon we reached the door, the black, sun-blistered lighthouse door, that gaped for us ajar. So discuss how the speaker is feeling, and then add your notes in here and pause the video to do so. On you go. Let's see how else he's feeling further on in the poem. As on the threshold for a spell we paused, we seemed to breathe the smell of lime wash and of tar, familiar as our daily breath, as though it were some strange scent of death. And so, yet wondering side by side, we stood a moment, still tongue-tied, and each with black foreboding eyed the door, ere we should fling it wide to leave the sunlight for the gloom, till, plucking courage up at last, hard on each other's heels we passed into the living room. So how is the speaker feeling and how do you know? This time what I want you to do is to discuss that as a group and then go into the box underneath and not just write down how you think the speaker's feeling, but what words or phrases give you those clues. I want you to copy them in as well. On you go. Moving on then to some more clues, and here's the next section of the poem. Yet, as we crowded through the door, we only saw a table spread for dinner, meat and cheese and bread, but all untouched, and no one there, as though when they sat down to eat, ere they could even taste, alarm had come, and they in haste had risen and left the bread and meat, for at the table head a chair lay tumbled on the floor. Okay, so at this point I want you to stop and I want you to think for a moment, what's your theory? What do you think has happened to these three lighthouse keepers? Just keep it in your own head first. Maybe even write it down in the box. And then when the video is paused, I want you to then share your theory with the rest of your class and maybe add to your own theory if someone's come up with something you think maybe is better, or don't if you think actually you've got the winning theory. We're going to move on now to think about the words in the poem. So let's listen to the next section. We listened, but we only heard the feeble cheeping of a bird that starved upon its perch. And, listening still without a word, we set about our hopeless search. What words in this stanza stood out to you? Is there anything there that you think is a strange word to use or an interesting word to use? If you can think of any, note them down in that section underneath your slide in your OneNote. Now I want you to think about what the speaker does. So this is the next section of the poem. We hunted high, we hunted low, and soon ransacked the empty house. Then o'er the island to and fro we ranged, to listen and to look in every cranny, cleft or nook that might have hid a bird or mouse. But though we searched from shore to shore, we found no sign in any place, and soon again stood face to face before the gaping door, and stole into the room once more as frightened children steal. So I want you to again to discuss what the speaker has done, add to your notes, but again if you've noticed any interesting words or phrases, put them in as well because you might want to come back to that when we go on to our next lesson. On you go. So let's summarise what's happened so far. Aye, though we hunted high and low and hunted everywhere, of the three men's fate we found no trace of any kind in any place but a door ajar and an untouched meal and an over-toppled chair. So just have a discussion. What's happened so far? Move on then to the speaker's own theories. So let's listen to this next section of the poem and then I want you to add notes again about what you think the speaker thinks has happened. And as we listened in the gloom of that forsaken living room, a chill clutch on our breath, we thought how ill chance came to all who kept the Flannan light, and how the rock had been the death of many a likely lad, how 6 had come to a sudden end and 3 had gone stark mad, and one whom we'd all known as friend had leapt from the lantern one still night and fallen dead by the lighthouse wall. And long we thought on the 3 we sought, and of what might yet befall. So what's happened in the past? And what does the speaker think might have happened now? Add your notes into the section. Moving on to the final stanzas then. Like curs a glance has brought to heel, we listened flinching there, and looked on the untouched meal and the over-toppled chair. We seemed to stand for an endless while, though still no word was said. 3 men alive on Flannan Isle, who thought on 3 men dead. Okay, so now I want you to add your final theory. So there's 3 men here coming to find what's happened to the other 3 men, but the other 3 men have disappeared. What do you think happened to the three men of Flannan Isle? And add it into your section there. What you've actually done, folks, is thought about all the main ideas of quite a big poem. And we're going to think about that in more detail in our next lesson. But if you've finished before the time of the lesson is over, then what I would like you to do is use the rest of the lesson to look over your private reading project. Remember, you can watch the private reading video again, it's on our YouTube channel. And make sure that you've got a book or a short story that you're happy with. And remember that you've got 3 novels or 6 short stories to read before the beginning of February. Good luck!